You're getting pretty good with that Zook.
Good morning, viewers of Blue Smoke and Black Ink, the 30-minute sit down with the great writers of America. And today we're really honored to have Tony Magistrale here. Tony is a poet, he's a scholar, he's the world's expert on Stephen King. And to tell the truth, if I ever get my own crime family, this man will be the capo de tutti capi, the boss of all bosses. Hiya, Tony. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, Jimmy. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. Before we go any further, I want to say that if any time during the next half hour you feel like jumping up and saying, "Look, they're taking away the fried chicken," you go ahead and do that. Let me explain to my viewers about, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more. Tony and I were on the faculty of the Breadloaf, Vermont Young Authors Conference. And when it was done, when the students were all gone, they had a barbecue for us. And Tony and I found ourselves sitting at a picnic table with a bunch of elderly women, all poets, and they were discussing, the ramifications of iambic pentameter and stuff like that. And Tony jumps up and yells, "Look, they're taking away the fried chicken." And the entire table, ladies included, ran to get their taste of chicken. So Tony will remember that. So feel free to do that at any time.
I will. That's one of my favorite stories too.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that. Let me introduce you to our folks. I've already said you're a scholar, you're a poet. From my book here, Blue Smoke and Black Ink, Tony received the Borgadillo Award for Italian American Poetry. In academia, he received the Fulbright postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Milan, Italy, the Croce Maurice Award for Excellence in Teaching at the University of Vermont, as well as the George V. Kidder Outstanding Faculty Award. He buys his time between being a teacher, being a great guy, being a poet, and being a scholar. Tony, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about your new book?
We could do that. We could also talk about poetry. I followed your advice when you set this up and found a couple of poems that might be fun for me to read to you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Shall we start with those?
We could, sure.
Okay, let's read a few poems and then we'll get on to King Noir.
Okay.
I've got a few of yours too here I wouldn't mind reading, but you go ahead, introduce and read a few.
Well, when you asked me to be on your podcast, I said I knew you were going to want to talk about authorship and you want to talk about poetry, and it occurred to me that one of the things that's been happening to me most recently, and I think I blame Trump for a lot of that, is that my poems, it seems to me, have become more political and more social, and that's I think the thing that stands out for me the most in the last year or so. So I'd
Hmm.
like to read a couple of the poems that deal with subject matter that is um, often ignored by poets, that not by good poets, but by many poets. They forget that they're members of a social class. They forget that they're members of a culture, and a culture that's under, I would say, duress right now.
Yep.
And I'd like to read a couple of poems that are my way of addressing some of these things.
Go ahead.
Okay, the first one I want to read to all of you is about the homeless, and it's called "They've Always Been With Us," which is a statement that my father used to make to me whenever we would talk about issues dealing with uh, social change and class warfare. And that was the way in which he described the poor, that they've always been with us. What are we to do with them? Those of us complacently woke, educated, gainfully employed, faced with the scruffy mob that is not, who toil at jobs insufficient to cover rent, squandering their hard scrabble dollars in bars and on cigarettes. America's underclass, saddled with the consequences of so many bad choices, and with whom we shake our heads, gravely disappointed. Invisible nuisances, except when panhandling in front of our expensive shops and businesses, or when their brawling spills out of darkened alleyways to complicate our dining experience. We would wish them to go someplace else. Allow us the counterfeit leisure of forgetting about them, pretending they don't exist, except that these are our prodigal sons and daughters. And before consigning them back to prison, we should post ourselves a reminder.
Tony, that was just terrific. What I love about your poetry is you're never trying to impress anybody. So many poets, I feel, they try to be obscure
Yeah,
and mystical. You walk out on stage, the poet's podium, and you say, here's what I got to say. Here's what I want to say. You say it beautifully. You say it with everyday language, understandable and yet poetic. Is that particular poem been published in any of your poetry books yet, Tony?
no, this is not that old.
Uh-huh.
That's what I said about my recent stuff. And this is, I'm reading you recent material here,
Yeah,
stuff. And, I think that the thing that, if you want to talk about this poem a little bit more in detail, the thing,
sure.
the thing that I like about this poem and that I think worked well is that it's balanced. It's got comments about it's commenting about the homeless and um, the kind of activity that goes on in any city. But it's also commenting on those of us who are in positions of power and who are dining at expensive restaurants or perhaps even going to the point of where um, they become invisible to us because we're so actively involved in our own lives. So I think that it's kind of working with both sides. It's kind of saying, okay, there's they've spent here is a group of people who've spent so much of their hard-earned money on cigarettes and booze, and then there's the other side that looks at that with disgust, not realizing that that's a comment on them at the same time. So
Wow, that's really good. Go ahead.
that's why I like this poem because it seems to me to start off well, that opening line. What are we to do with them? Those of us complacently woke. You know, and
Yeah,
that's a deliberate choice. Because,
yeah,
of course, we've all heard the right talking about what woke is and how woke is often filled with such pretensions. So I wanted to bring that in to kind of start us off complacently woke, uh, and,
yeah,
and then to turn that around. I mean, I like this poem because it keeps turning around.
yeah.
It keeps evolving. There's one side that looks this way, and then there's another side that looks this way. And
Yeah, you hear that elitist person saying, "Ah, they're just spending their money on cigarettes and look, he's got a cell phone. He must have a couple of bucks." And
right.
then as you say, you rotate it to what's really going on. Just beautifully done, beautifully done. You got
Yeah,
another one for us, Tones?
yeah, sure. Um, this one I wrote about 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
It's called Catch of the Day.
that's a good New England title.
It is.
Hmm.
I think this is a good New England poem. Every Friday, Adrian in the deli section presents me with a resplendent foot-long plank of pink salmon, deboned and glistening under fluorescent lighting, and then slices out a center cut for my dinner. It always makes me feel a little guilty, aware as I am that I've done nothing to earn this sweet gift from the sea. No baiting a hook, casting a line, getting my feet wet. To wrestle this fish into my possession. No slicing it open and gutting it out, from fisherman to surgeon, intimately acquainted with its viscera of organs and blood. This is what it means to be a postmodern human, walking to the cashier through the supermarket's piped in John Denver music and frigid air conditioning, divorced from nature, the swell of ocean, pristine rivers, where this fish once reigned free, driving it home, wrapped in clear plastic.
Great. And poems should just snap closed like a compact, and that one does. What you're doing there is you're taking everyday language, you're not using those five-syllable words, and you're taking an everyday situation and you're turning it into poetry. I just love it. I just love it. I got one for you now,
Yeah.
a Tony Magistrale poem. It's from your book, Dialogues Among Lost Tourists, and it's about a subject dear to both of our hearts, Tony Soprano.
Ah,
Okay, it's called Tony Soprano Sleeps with the Fishes. What are you gonna do, Anthony John Soprano? He always knew he was destined to become a capofamiglia, a captain of industry, following his old man and Uncle Junior. Tony did them one better. He carved out a palace in the Jersey suburbs, but not one with two principesses. And while he never finished college or learned the right lessons from the History Channel and those gangster movies he watched on DVD, Dr. Melfi knew his panic attacks were about more than rare capocello or a misplaced family of ducks. He was a man of capricious appetites, loved sports and women and food, but most of all, he loved money. Maybe he loved them because Soprano was no better or worse than either you or me. Or if you live long enough in this world, nobody comes out clean. That's my favorite line. Thousands mourned in church when he died, not from a bullet, but from an overburdened heart. His coffin surrounded by grieving family and made men from all the families, and none of them was a bit surprised when Meadow cried the loudest. Now, I know some non soprano fans might not appreciate that poem, but I just love it. And once again, you're just taking everyday common people and turning them into poetry. Thank you, Tones.
hey, thanks for reading it. It's one of my favorite poems too. I think when I sent it to a colleague of mine named John Gennari. John's very interested in Italian American things, and he teaches a course in Italian American literature. And he went on to send it to Isabella Scorza, the woman who played Gloria.
Oh, yeah, beauty.
And Gloria wrote back to him and said, "This made me cry."
Oh, wow. That's great.
That was a great achievement.
That's terrific.
Yeah,
Let's get away from poetry and into your other side. Tony,
sure.
as I told you at the beginning, isn't only a poet, he's a scholar. What's this all about, Tony? King Noir.
Well, it's got a long history, Jim. Its history really begins with the my co-author, whose name is Michael Bluen,
And who
uh,
was once a student of yours, I think.
a graduate student of mine. Who went on to get a PhD from Michigan State University and became a professor himself. And one day, Michael sent me an email and said, "I think it's time we wrote a book together." And I said, oh boy, all right, well, what do you want to write about? And of course, the thing that we had in common was what we studied together, the work of Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
And we wrote a book called Stephen King in American History. And then we had so much fun doing that. And I think it received such a positive response from our readers that we decided we wanted to write another one. Only this was going to be a very different kind of book. Because one thing that I'd noticed for many years is the way in which Stephen King has overlaps with detective fiction. And I ran this by Michael. He also recognized that. And we started talking about those books that King has published that are very strongly detective stories. Books like, for example, Mr. Mercedes, which is a story of a detective who's trying to, solve a crime. And the more we began to talk about those detective books that King has published, the more we started thinking, this goes beyond the quote detective genre in King's work. And it goes beyond it to the point of where almost everything this guy writes has been shaped by detective fiction. And one thing we noticed immediately was in all the interviews that the two of us have looked at a lot of interviews that King has done over the years. He never talks so much about horror. He doesn't talk about the influence of Poe, although, of course, Poe invented the detective story after all. But there's not a lot of conversation about horror writers. It's more about detective writers, Ed McBain, Raymond Chandler, the people that King really took, I think, really learned the most from are detective writers. And we began to see elements of detective fiction even in things like The Shining, which doesn't immediately sound like a detective book. No. But there are strong elements that are there. So this is what we did. We sat down and we tracked all the examples of detective fiction, even in the genre that isn't detection, that's very supernatural and centered on horror fiction. And then I sent him a note because I know Steve, and I sent him an email. I said, would you mind doing an interview with us about talking about detective fiction? And he wrote back and he said, I haven't got time to do an interview with you, but what I will do is answer 10 of your questions.
Wow.
So we sent him 10 questions, and he didn't answer them. He wrote an essay, which is the first chapter of the book King Noir. He wrote an essay addressing how detective fiction has shaped his own fiction. So that really got us going.
That's terrific. I know you've had a long relationship with King, and yes, his lead-off chapter in this book is just terrific.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something that we don't know about Stephen King? I know you were actually a researcher for him for a while,
Yeah.
and you've known him pretty well. Tell us a little about that guy. He's a strange fellow. I don't know I've read two or three of his books, and that's it. So I'm far from being an expert. But yeah, give us a little insight into the man.
Well, yeah. One thing that I can point out to you, Don, uh, Don Jimmy,
Thank you. Thank you
point
for
out,
the honor.
um, on one of the occasions, I've interviewed him now 3 times, and on one of these occasions, I said, "Could you tell me something about what we're missing? What don't we understand about your fame, your legacy?" And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, "A lot of you don't understand that I'm having fun here, and that throughout throughout my au vieux, there's although he didn't use that word, there's a sense of humor that's at work." And he said the directors who understand me the best are the ones who also find ways of bringing that humor out, like Rob Reiner in Stand By Me,
Yeah.
or Frank Darabont, in the Shawshank Redemption.
Which is your favorite, I think, adaptation of a King novel, isn't it?
I'm
Into a
very
film?
fond. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I really admire about and of course, as you know, I think I gave you a copy of it. I ended up writing a book about Shawshank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but and he went on to name a couple of other directors and the way in which they understand that he's having fun. That there's a sense of humor that's at work here.
What's my philosophy of life, Tony? You know this. Enjoy yourself, right?
And take care of yourself,
And
mate.
take care of yourself. You mentioned Poe.
Yeah.
You've done books on Poe. This is one of them. The thought just occurred to me a minute ago. Both these writers are detective writers, both are horror writers. You ever thought of a book, or maybe it's been done already, comparing these two writers, Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King?
Well, if you look at King Noir, there's a chapter in there. One of the early chapters deals with the detective fiction of Poe and its connection to King.
Mm-hmm.
So that part's really done because that was hard, probably the hardest chapter that Michael and I wrote about um, King and his connection to detective fiction, because the Poe links are so interesting and so convoluted. But
Yeah.
you're leaving one element out of this, Jim, that's really important. Poe also wrote comic sketches. There's a whole side. There's a whole side to Poe that deals with what I would call the comic grotesque.
Really?
And no, yeah, we don't study that. And very seldom is it anthologized along with the Pit and the Pendulum and the Telltale Heart, all those chestnuts. But what people don't realize is that Poe wrote as many comic stories as he did horror stories.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's real. That's really strange. You
yeah.
you mentioned before about co-authoring a book. How did that work? Did you guys do separate chapters, or did you take the same chapter and just keep bouncing drafts back and forth? I would find it impossible to work with another writer. How did you do it?
I think more the latter, that we would write sections and then send the section to the other person, and
Okay.
that would receive commentary, and even to the point of where we would correct each other's language and change things, so that very often you could go through a book like King Noir, and I would have a difficult time telling you who wrote what, because
Wow.
many of these chapters, like the Poe chapter, went through multiple drafts. This is you're looking at probably a 3 to 4 year enterprise in
Wow.
writing in putting together King Noir.
Gee, that's great. And how'd you work? Mostly through emails
Yes,
or
yeah. We would
yeah.
we would send documents. We would send electronic documents to one another, and we would comment, or we would write various things, and then the other person would get it back, and then and make changes.
Oh, gee, that's great. That's great. Well, we've talked about you as a poet, as a scholar, but let's get to the really important thing. You're a member of the Buffalo Mafia. How are your Bills doing? You really think they have a shot at it this year?
Well, I put their odds at better than the Jets.
Oh, that hurt. Thanks a lot.
I'll give them that. But no, there are problems. There are very serious problems, and most of them center on the defense.
Really?
Injuries and failure to address flaws that have been there for the last couple of years, like a serious pass rusher.
Okay.
Don't have any of those things in place.
Offensively, I love how your man, the quarterback, doesn't doesn't slide on a run, but he puts his head down and bowls into either leaps over or bowls over the defender, which is just
This
great.
is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, we're
Side.
running a little short of time. I'm not sure how many minutes we have left, so I want to get to one more important thing. You're a grandfather.
I am indeed.
And isn't it everything I told you it was going to be? It's
It,
great.
it really is fun. The other day we were sitting in his house and we were drawing pictures. I was drawing pictures and he was commenting on them of trains because
Uh,
he's going through his train period right now.
yeah,
It's telling him about European trains and the way in which they connect to overhead electrical lines, and that's
yeah.
where they get their energy from, and the batteries within the engines. And he was just fascinated because he'd never seen a train that had that kind of power source.
Wow.
Drew him a picture of it, and then I sent him a picture of it. Yeah,
That's great. And that's how the old streetcars used to work in American cities, you know. You'd even see the sparks flying from overhead.
yeah, that's right. And sometimes you can see that in Europe too, because the tram system is also connected to the electrical grid.
Wow. Oh, that's great. Tony, we're running out of time. It's been just so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I want to again mention your book, King Noir. Uh, there you go. And I don't know, any final comments, or should we just sign off? Oh,
Oh,
well, we should have a sit down come this spring. I'll be up to Vermont,
okay.
and you, Baruti, and I will have a sit down. We don't know if we can get Citro there. We'll try.
I should tell you this. Baruti had a tree fall on his house yesterday.
Oh, really?
So
Oh,
instead of going out to lunch, I went over there with my chainsaw because I'm the only person in the English department that owns and much less knows how to use a chainsaw.
wow.
And rescued Baruti from his
Oh,
bullets.
geez. Well, I used a chainsaw for many years in my 40 years in Vermont. And
Uh,
if you count my fingers, I still got 10. Yeah, you do too. Good. Because those things kick back and do some terrible damage. You be careful of that, Capotones.
oh, there's a reason why I'm the only one in the English department that knows how to use this.
Yeah, probably true. So I'm going to have to add chainsaw lumberman to your list of many credits.
I would appreciate that. That's probably my most recent.
There you go. Capo Tones, it's always a pleasure, but this has been just great. Thank you so much for being a guest here on Blue Smoke and Black Ink.
Loved it, Jim. Good to see you.
You're good to see you. Take care, Capo Tones.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.